Okay, hello, here we are, and we are live for another episode of Truth, Wisdom, and Freedom Conversations. And I have here with me Rolf Krahnert, I hope I said that right, who is he's a conscious living coach, and he's also a Gene Keys ambassador, and he's also a guide for transformational processes. And I actually know his wife, Krista Krahnert, who is a natural doctor, and we had a little chat about holistic well-being and the frequency of emotions and mind and everything around frequency. And so that was a cool conversation. And now I have here Rolf, who has been working with consciousness for the last 25 years. And so it's really exciting to have you here to talk a little bit more about that. So maybe you can start first by telling us who you are and kind of the work that has led you to where it is that you are today.
Yes, thank you. Hello and welcome. And thank you for the kind invitation, Johnson. I really appreciate it. My name is Rolf Krahnert, born in Germany, came to Australia in 1992. Yeah, 1992. I had to think there for a while. My background is I was a police officer actually in Germany, and also a trained physiotherapist. Came to Australia, and here I worked as a personal trainer, health coach, and then 1995 I started also doing a counseling course, and then I had what you would call, or I would call, a deep night of the soul experiences that sort of drove me down the path of self-inquiry and try to make sense of everything.
Can you talk a little bit about you called it the deep night of the soul, is that right? I call it the dark night of the soul.
Night.
I think it's the same thing.
Yeah.
And so for those of you who are not familiar with that term, the dark night of the soul, it's something that Joseph Campbell talks about in his path of the hero. And it's something that happens, it just unfolds. It could be very early on in someone's life, it could be a little bit later, and it is a process of where we go into an abyss almost of our deep, dark fears, and that can be catalyzed by any little thing, or it could be a series of events. And it's a huge test of our resilience, and also of our faith and our trust in life and the universe. And so that's why it's called the dark night of the soul. And everyone who is on a path to greater awareness and consciousness experiences that. So that's some reference for those of you who are watching. So maybe you can talk to us about what led you there to the dark night of the soul, and your process in coming out of that.
Yeah, I liked your description of the dark night of the soul. Perfect. And yeah, that was finding myself in a strange country, and I was in the process of getting separated. And during the whole process, I lost everything. I had no orientation, what to do, what am I doing here? I couldn't go back, and it was a whole scenario of financial loss, and didn't believe in myself. And yeah, it was a really difficult time. But something sort of sparked the keen interest in me that said, dive deeper, let it happen. It's all okay. It's all good. It's here for a purpose. And that's when I started meditation. People took me to, or friends at the time took me to meditation classes, and I've never done this. I've never exposed to this kind of thing. So reluctantly I went, but something happened, and people gave me books. At the time, I remember someone gave me a Course in Miracles book. And first I was resisting this whole thing, but I had no choice for some reason. Something pulled me into this whole direction, and I had to learn to be comfortable with chaos and confusion. And that led me first on the path of the Course in Miracles, where I was studying, and then later on teaching A Course in Miracles, the principles of non-duality. And but first I was resisting because of the religious turns, and everyone, or many people I've met so far, could relate to it. But I for some reason I was led beyond the words, towards the deeper meaning of this whole thing. And then I was following paths like Eckhart Tolle. I think many people are familiar with Eckhart Tolle's teaching, or Ken Wilber's Integral Spirituality and the Human Design. And in 2009, I came across Richard Rudd's book, The Gene Keys, which since then really fascinated me. So I completed the whole course to become a Gene Keys ambassador as well. And since then, that is my passion. You know, I didn't want to do anything else. That was like, okay, this is my purpose. This is what I'm here for. I like to be. I don't like to call myself a teacher. I'm a companion. I accompany people on their way of finding meaning and purpose in their lives, whether it's with their jobs or relationships or money. You know, there's always something that drives us to find answers.
Yeah.
And I find it fascinating.
Yeah, I love what you said about being a companion and accompanying someone on their journey wherever it is that they are. And it's very much, it sounds like you're meeting people halfway where they are and guiding them to empower themselves and to make their own decisions with all of the many mindfulness tools that you have studied, and like the Human Design and Gene Keys, all wonderful contemplative tools based off of ancient wisdom. And I love what you said about being comfortable in the chaos and the confusion. And I think that's an easy concept to understand, but it's not easy to practice.
Exactly.
So can you talk to us a little bit about how you got there to embody being comfortable in the mud, if you will?
Yeah.
Or being comfortable in the mud.
Yeah. As you might, or as our listeners can imagine, no one wants to suffer. No one wants to feel bad. No one likes conflict. And I just put it out there because the human psyche is sort of built always towards, okay, I don't like this, and how can I escape this? How can I relieve my symptoms? But I think the path towards awakening is to allow our suffering, to embrace it, to accept it. And I like what Richard Rudd always says. He says, every shadow contains a gift. So out of the mud, there's this growth and this sudden insights and breakthroughs, and later on epiphanies, where we can have glimpses of our true essence, which then shines through and pulls us upwards, so to speak. And through complete, I don't know how it happens, I cannot even describe it. It was an insight process that allowed me to calm down and to just feel within what is happening, to feel the discomfort, to feel the upset. And at the time it didn't make any sense, and I didn't like it. I did not like it at all. But I had times where I just magically pulled towards just sitting with it, sitting on the beach for hours, not knowing what was going on, and just giving over or giving up the question towards what you would call greater consciousness. I just surrendered, if you want. I surrendered. It's probably the word that should describe it.
Would you say that the surrendering or the letting go of asking the questions, or even having the desire for the question, is what brought you out of the dark night of the soul?
Yes, perfect, John. This totally letting go of not wanting or not looking for answers. It's just being at the moment, being with what was, and being with this conflict and confusion. And something in me said, you know what, it's okay. I don't know. I used to, have plans, and I'm not saying there's anything wrong with making plans. It's great. I still do it today. But we also need to find a balance between I give up. Not giving up in the sense of giving up, but I surrender. I don't know what's going on. I don't know what this is good for. And I'm confident, I know and I feel that the answer will reach me when it's time.
Yeah.
And I made that experience. Things, assets, and people all of a sudden showed up, and everything was there. Everything was provided for.
Yeah.
So that was a magical time.
It is a magical time, and it brings us to the first point in the bullet points, which was really talking about how to acknowledge and integrate the shadow aspects of the self, which we can call that the victim or the wounded child. All these different archetypes. If we think of our self as a carousel of characters, all playing different parts and different roles, we have the part of self that has to be very logical and planning oriented, who pays the bills and gets the rent in on time, right? And then we have some people are parents, some people are bosses, some people have a family they have to take care of, like older families. So we all are playing these different characters in our lives, and so it can be a little bit difficult to integrate that part of ourself that feels like we're not enough, right? The shadow aspect, or we're not deserving enough, or you were talking about in your own personal life with losing everything. You had suffered loss after loss after loss. So when we're in the throes of the storm, it feels almost like there's I don't know if you've experienced this. I've definitely experienced this, where there's an addiction to the confusion and the chaos, where it feels like, oh, I like being confused, or I want to keep asking questions because this round robin of just asking questions and feeling confused feels familiar, and I just want to keep running this loop, because if I break this loop, I don't know what's on the other side, and that's the scariest part. It's like we know we have to break this loop, right? But we choose to stay on it, consciously or subconsciously. And I think that when you made that choice to let go and to surrender the knowing and to just let the answers arrive, that's a big thing, because our modern culture it doesn't really allow for us to surrender or give up, right? Our culture is very much around competition and striving and pushing and climbing this linear ladder to success, whatever that means.
Yeah, that's right. To stay in control,
Yeah.
That's what society teaches us.
Yeah.
So for me, there are three major questions we can ask ourselves to embark on this journey of finding out our shadows and our purpose, why we're here. And the first question is, what is the nature of reality? What is all this about? And the second question, what is the nature of my experience? Because I want to have people trust in their own experience rather than their thoughts and beliefs. And thirdly, how can I find lasting peace and happiness? And I think they're very deep questions. And in everyday life, if we are busy making a living, it's pretty difficult to pursue those questions, unless someone like me is really pushed into a corner where all of a sudden you have to ask those questions, or I had to ask those questions.
So do you feel then that in order to go on this path of awakening to a greater understanding of reality and of consciousness, that it's almost a requisite to go through the dark night of the soul experience, to experience, like what the Buddha said, life is suffering, to experience a big dose of suffering so that we can ask those questions? Is that what you feel the point of suffering is?
I would say it doesn't need to be suffering.
Okay.
It doesn't need to be, but it seems that in our society that the way it is through suffering. But what it really points down to, and if we look at the global crisis at the moment we all find ourselves, it's a moment of pausing, of stopping and listening and acknowledging the mind and acknowledging what's going out there, and stopping to fight and stopping to come up with a solution and wanting to have everything as it was before. And I found that there are three major parts to our what I call shadow aspects. And the first one is I call it slavery, the modern day slavery system. It's our challenge. And it seems like that we are victim, or we are some kind of a victim state to what I call a heartless system. But is that really so? If we look at the system, I look at 5 major points. The money system is debt-based. Is that right? Something in us, something in me tells me it is not right. There is the economy. It always talks about this endless growth. Is that healthy? No, I don't think so. We look at the media. If you listen closely, it's a propaganda machine. It's not telling the truth. And I make that statement. And we look at our health system. It's not about health, it's about profit. Is that right? No. And the energy system, it's all based on hot fusion, burning fossil fuel. And I know there are already other systems out there. So collectively, you can say, okay, this is our society, this is our life, if you want, our world. And we seem to be slaves to the systems. But are we really? Do we have choices? It's for everyone else to find out. Is it really our purpose? Now I come to purpose. Slavery, the next level up, is our purpose. Why are we here? What are we here to do? It's a question for everyone to ask. Everyone is individual. And are we really here to feed the system with our energy, the 9-to-5 job? And I couldn't do this anymore when I went through this time. I said, I never ever want to go back there. That was my personal choice. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with it. There's nothing wrong with it. 9-to-5. It's all good. But I had the feeling I couldn't do it anymore.
Right.
So, and therefore,
that was your authentic truth, and you chose.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah. It was my authentic truth, and I made that choice, and I made sacrifices, big time. But it was okay for me. I wanted to be true to myself. I knew that I wanted to go along this path to assist other people on the same journey if they're ready and willing and open. And the next level, Richard Rudd calls the essence, our divine essence, that's our freedom. Inherently, we are free. It's our essence. What we truly are is sovereign spiritual beings. We are unlimited, ever-present awareness. But you don't know that when you're stuck in a rut. So through pausing, one could get through this realization, through meditation, to mindfulness, or it seems that most of us go through it through conflicts, everything breaking down, that life, if you want, forces us to stop what we're doing. So the next part of this, I call it on the level of shadow, I call it the forgetting. We forgot who we are. We come into a world conditioned to believe that we are born into a pre-existing universe that was always there, and that we are mind, body, and there's the world, first, second, third person perspective. But what do we really know of the world? It's a process of perception. What do we know of the body? It's a process of sensing and feeling. What do we know of the mind? It's a process of thinking and imagining. All of those things make up my experience, and my experience appears in awareness, is known by awareness, and ultimately is only made of awareness. Which brings me then to our potential. What I am is pure presence. That is the ground of all being. Yeah. That is where everything can change, but then it's only about communication. So you can ask yourself over and over again, who am I? What is the nature of my experience? that stuff, what scientists call matter, no one has ever found. It's 99.999%. Even the quantum science tells us that.
Empty space.
Empty space. No one has ever found this stuff they call matter. No one has ever found this thing called mind. It's elusive. But what we all can experience is this pure presence, being. Are you aware? Yes. Are you knowing? Yes.
And I think, and also with that, are we aware? Yes. Are we knowing? Yes. But are we also not aware and not knowing? It's also a yes. And I think
that's the forgetting again.
It's the forgetting. Yeah. It's the knowing to forget and the forgetting, and then to be reminded again.
Yeah.
It's acknowledging also that many different truths can exist on many different layers and dimensions. And from a shamanic point of view, we have 4 perceptual states. And this can vary depending on different cultures and different traditions. And in the lineage that I'm initiated in, which is from the Incan tradition, Peru, it's you have the South, which is the serpent. And that is the serpent perspective is very much related to the physical body, just like how a serpent sheds its skin. It gets rid of mass and density it doesn't need. And so that sense of perception is very much grounded in the 3rd dimensional reality. Like I'm looking at the computer, this is the microphone, there are the lights, that's real.
Yeah.
I mean, and in different cultures, it might be a different animal archetype.
Yeah.
And then in the West, we have the jaguar energy, which is very much the energy around the mind and the emotions. It's a thought feeling loop, and our relationship to the subconscious, and how we then recycle the wounds and the lessons and the failed relationships and the bully at work and all of these things, right, around the relational, how we mulch that up and recycle it into a learning. And then we move into the North, and we have that, with the hummingbird, and the energy of the hummingbird really is the symbol of the mythic, because, the hummingbird has to travel thousands of miles from, Brazil to Canada with these tiny little wings that are not supposed to allow it to fly. But because it's so impassioned by this inner purpose, it just goes. So it's really about making the impossible possible through the language of symbols and dreams, and moving into the realm of the invisible and spirit. And then you get to the East, and you have pure energy itself without story, and that's represented by the eagle, right? And so there's this total forgetting of like what the meaning is there, because it's your energy. And so you have these 4 perceptual states, and they're all real.
Yeah.
And they're all true. It's just that we oftentimes get stuck in logic, which is very much serpent and jaguar. It's this left and right brain of like, this can only be true through a reductionist way of thinking and of science, because I look at, I need hard, facts, and I need, I need charts and proof and and that's how I know something is certain. But that's one level of perception.
Exactly.
When you get to the symbolic, when you get to dream time, when you get to just a direct experience of energy itself, you no longer need the ways of seeing the world of energy through the lens of the serpent. It doesn't work. But if you were definitely to exist in serpent land, you would follow those rules, right? So every direction, every perception of reality has its own set of almost guidelines to look at.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of in some way, that's what I'm hearing from what you're saying. It's that there's many different truths, and that they can exist simultaneously all at once. And that's why it's sometimes confusing for people, because they're like, well, is it this or is it that?
Yeah, it can be confusing. It's both. We live in a world of what they call polarities, though. It's both of the same coin. And there are different layers of perception, different layers of the mind, and every experience is real, whether it's a physical experience, mental, emotional, or spiritual experience. An experience is real because it's known. And it all comes down to the I am presence. I am that I am. The I is being, or M is being, the I knows. It's a knowing being, I call it. I'm a knowing being. I know my experience and all kinds, a variety of experience, and they're all real. They're all valid. But the mind, the human mind, seems to forget sometimes, and then it's pulled in one direction, preoccupied with objective experience, which is okay. There's nothing wrong with it. That's what the human mind does. But from time to time, we can remember to the recognition of who we truly are, that the ground of all experience is the I am presence. That brings me to the third part of the shadow aspect, which is based on fear. And I always call it, it's not love that makes the world go round, it's fear. Especially these days, it's all the mechanism to control people or slaves from the so-called outside system, which is all an expression of ourselves too, individually and collectively. But it's fear, and fear is an expression of separateness, separation. I'm separate from myself, I'm separate from others, I'm separate from the world, I'm separate from my creator. That creates a sense of otherness, and that is then projected, and it creates our suffering, the story of our suffering, individual as well as collective. There are two parts of suffering. One is rejection. One says, I don't want what is, because I feel vulnerable, and I need to protect myself because I believe I'm this body, and I share the destiny of this body-mind. So we can inquire into that. The second part is seeking. I want what is not, because I feel a sense of lack and incompleteness. Therefore, I try to complete myself through, relationships and objects and status and symbols and this and that. But does it make me truly happy? Everyone can explore that for themselves. And I know many people have said, well, this new Ferrari didn't really make me happy because I'm already looking for the next car. I like Ferraris. I would like to drive one too, but if not, it's okay as well. Nice things, it's great, but we cannot find everlasting peace and happiness with acquiring things and relationships. Along the way, they serve, and there's nothing wrong with it. I don't reject anything, because life experience is full, and we are here to embrace the fullness of life and our experience. So then again, it comes to a point where we invite it to pause. And from the Gene Keys, that's the art of contemplation. The first step is pausing. Create pauses, mindfulness. Pay attention to what I feel. Pay attention to what I think. Pay attention to what I see and hear. And let it all in. Allow it. I don't need to fight or resist it or try to complete myself. I can if I want to. That's okay. I'll go along that way for a little while. That's fine. But it creates a sense of passion for life, passion for my experience, or compassion. Compassion first for myself and compassion for the others. Because if we see through the sense or the illusory sense of separation, and we've heard it before through in religious term, love your brother as yourself. No, or see your brother as yourself, because your brother is yourself. We all share common ground, which is presence. We all an expression of this unlimited, ever-present sense of I amness. We all an expression of that, and that makes us one.
Yeah, there's another saying that the shamans share, a very similar saying of leaving this life without any enemies.
Yeah.
And so we have this perception when let's say someone dislikes us or we dislike them, or there's some sort of friction or tension. That's an opportunity to grow.
Yeah.
And the Buddhists talk about loving kindness meditations and sending peace and prayer to your enemies as if they're your loved ones.
Yeah.
It's very much that's your growing opportunity. That's your lesson to learn how to cultivate peace, love, and kindness if that's truly what you want. And I think, going back to what you were saying about happiness and about peace, because we're using words to describe something that cannot be expressed.
Exactly.
word happiness is very much colored to every individual's experience and their expectations of what they see as happy. So happiness for, you know, Joe who works in a big corporate machine might be accumulating, you know, X amount of dollars per year, you know, this kind of house, this kind of car, this kind of social status, and that is happiness, right? And everything is going swimmingly. But the flaw to that is that, you know, like what you were talking about with the economic engine of having to grow and expand and wanting more and more and more, it's not sustainable. It's just, you look at nature, and nature has seasons. It just, there has to be a winter time for things to rebuild. And so that model itself, it doesn't lend itself to true happiness because it's not based in reality. And that's all we're talking about here is how do we connect things back to its natural essence and their natural state? Because if we don't, then we can't access true happiness, right? And then, you know, for Mary, who is just a mother and is like wanting to just nurture her children until they become adults, and then when the kids go off and they fly to college or university, and now she's left not knowing who she is anymore because she's no longer a mother. The kids don't need her anymore. I mean, I see this a lot with, you know, some old clients of mine. You know, you lose this sense of self, like, oh goodness, I can't be happy now because I'm not wanted, I'm not needed. So then there's this, you can either become like the smothering mother who's like doesn't let go of the children who have flown away, or you start to look for other ways to fill that void. And so it's a lot of these the shadow aspects of the self, you know, you're talking about, that if we don't integrate them and let go of the expectations of expecting, then we will inevitably suffer. We just will. That's just how things work. But if we invite, I mean, this is the other thing that comes up when you were talking. So that other people can perceive that by letting go of the wanting and the desiring, well, then life becomes really, you know, not interesting, not important, not like we can't commit to something, so it becomes indifferent in our choices because, well, it doesn't matter. I don't need to want anything. I don't need to do anything. So then that's the other extreme that people go, then what's the point? I'll just do nothing and just wait, right? So it's not that either.
No.
And it's not, you know, the attachment to the identity. So, you know, on this pendulum, how do we get to this centered place?
Yeah, through mindfulness and pausing and paying attention and allowing and breathing into one's experience, and then also realizing that what you said, life is a pendulum. You know, there are desires, yes, and there are wants, and there are lacks as well. Everything has seasons. It goes back and forth and up and down. There's a natural rhythm to anything in life, to our breath, to our heartbeat, to our lives in general, to society, to seasons. There's always an up and a down. And the more we connect with this I am presence, life will automatically flow. I'm not saying I don't make decisions anymore. Of course I do. I'm not saying that I don't have desires. Of course I do. Bought myself a new laptop yesterday, so because I wanted it. And but I don't get attached to it. If it's not there, then it's not there. And this is something I've learned through my experiences. I've learned that I'm happy with my own being. I don't need, I don't expect. I'm not attached to certain outcomes. But that doesn't mean that I have gotten rid of desires. Yes, I do. It's all normal. So it's embracing this whole, the fullness of one's life. And sometimes there are desires, sometimes there's not. Sometimes there's a new thing to play with, and sometimes there's not. But this coming to still stand for a moment, it doesn't mean one has to sit in meditation for 3 hours a day. You can if you want, but you know, this art of contemplation is so built into our modern life that we can stop and stop for a moment in any circumstance. We can contemplate while we do the dishes, or we can sit down for 5 minutes. It's just stopping and observing and breathing. Breath is the best way to focus your attention to the present moment, because that's all there is. There's always this present moment, here and now. There's nowhere to go. We're always here. There's no past, no future to go. We are always here and now. So if we connect more and more, and we can cultivate that more and more to this stillness, this essence within myself, then attachments or expectations, or the identifications with certain things and outcomes, they will naturally, slowly fall away, and life becomes more peaceful. What is happiness? I ask myself, or I get asked. Well, I say it's the absence of suffering. What is peace? Well, it's not suffering. Does it last? Not all the time. There are gaps in between. It comes and goes. But the more we practice and cultivate this, our glimpses of this peace and happiness, they'll get longer and longer and longer. And then all of a sudden, we are in conflict again.
Well, I would say that peace, I see happiness as a variant of peace. Happiness is a fleeting version of peace, and true peace is the acceptance of suffering in your life. Yeah. And it's the acceptance that things might swing one way or it might go the other way, but you remain centered in the eye of the storm always, because there's always some sort of storm happening in some part of the world. If it's not raining here, it's raining in the Caribbean. There's a storm somewhere. Right? So we just have to always remain anchored in our centeredness. So that brings me to the next bullet point around transmuting negative energy into creative impulse or potential that allows you to embody your fullest expression of self. And you're already starting to talk a little bit about that. So then how do we use negative energy? Since, if life is this pendulum and there's storms all around us, how do we use that, right? Or allow that to help us come to a place of centeredness without letting it take us, not being swept away by the negative emotions, but making them our friends? How do we repurpose it?
Yeah, that's a good point. A very good point. See, our society also conditions us to, if something is not comfortable, if we suffer physical symptoms, if we suffer relationship breakdowns, we are told, it shouldn't be, it's not right. Do something. Fix it. Fight against it. You see, the fight against this, the fight against that, fight against this, and now we fight against this. No, we need to come individually as well as collectively to stop fighting. Resistance creates resistance, or the other way around. But you know what I mean. If I resist, it persists. That's what I was going to say. So this resistance, this fight, this I don't want what is. Breathing, relaxing into, and automatically we allow it to be the way it is. Do I like it? No. Do I need to like it? No, of course not. If I have an injury, if I cut my finger, then it is what is. Do I need to get upset about it and create a whole story around it? No, I don't need to. Right. I can feel the pain. It's painful. All right. Okay. What do I need to do? I stop the bleeding. Okay, fine. So that's all taken care of. And then I can ask myself, what was going on? What did I feel? What did I think? What is it going to tell me? Because every symptom, let's talk about physical symptoms, any physical symptoms has a story. It's pointing you into something.
Yeah, it's a behavior pattern almost, because even with that, I can relate to myself. I used to tell this story of, I'm so clumsy. You know, if I do something and I would walk into the coffee table and I have so many bruises and cuts on my legs, right? So when I was younger, I used to go, oh God, I'm so clumsy, I'm so clumsy, I'm so stupid. Right? So then I would talk to myself and say those words. I would think those words until, you know, I made that of reality. Like, oh, I'm so clumsy, I'm so stupid, and it was this inner critic that kept feeding the inner critic, and it just was this cycle of never-ending criticism. And that was really damaging, right? So and that's something as simple as like a cut on the finger or walking into a table. So anything we do that creates some level of discomfort, we create a story around, instead of like, oh, okay, I banged into the thing again. Let me rub it. Let me breathe and let me move on, right? And then we tend to want to gossip and complain to people. And then this is something for people to just be aware of. You know, how do you take the points of discomfort in your day? Do you feel this need to indulge in wanting to just tell everyone about how awful your day was, right? This is something New York, I'm from New York, right? So New Yorkers love doing this. It's like, how are you doing? Oh, well, let me tell you a whole list of things that have gone wrong, you know? And everyone just commiserates together, and they bond in sharing misery, right? And when we're truly free of that, we can only talk about the beautiful things in life, and that requires vulnerability, which is
exactly. So that reminds me of always the question I like to ask people: who are you without your story? Oh, what story? What do you mean? And it's exactly what you said before. Oh, I'm so clumsy. I bumped my leg again against the table, and then this habitual thinking and putting ourselves down comes into play, and we most of the time we don't notice it. It's an automatism, and this whole point I try to make is become aware that we're stuck in an automatic thinking and feeling and being process, and stop for a moment and get out of this automatic wheel. It's turning anyway, but let's look at it for a moment. And that also brings me to the last point I was going to make before: love. How comes? What is love? You know, when we clean up our shadows and we grow up to our purpose, then we can embrace our essence. It will open up by itself. We can't go there by ourselves. It's what I call the call of grace. Grace, our essence, pulls us slowly but gently back to itself, because this is where we belong. And we can't jump, you know, we have to take steps. And when we realize, I like a beautiful saying from A Course in Miracles: love is all-encompassing, and what is all-encompassing can have no opposite.
I love that. So I have a teacher who has a similar saying. My teacher, Courtney Bauer, she has an acronym, love. So LOVE. Love is the law of vastness expressing or expanding. So it's this vastness expressing upon itself, and it just keeps growing and growing and growing. It's never ending. It's infinite.
Yeah, exactly. So and that's what the Course in Miracles reminds us of, that what is all-encompassing includes you and me and us and everything, all of experience. It's all-encompassing. What we are is this I am presence, or love, this all-encompassing love, not the relationship love, but it's so much more. You can't even put it into words. And that points us then, or that can express itself in moments of peace and happiness.
And sometimes in pain and suffering.
Yeah, but then it's a reminder again. It's something poking us in our back, and hello, you forgot. So if we take any opportunity when we become aware of a symptom or a pain or conflict or hurt or upset, well, I can even be a little bit grateful and thankful. Said, oh, thanks for reminding me again. I was falling out of my sense of being. I was too trapped into my story and this whole objective experience, which is okay, but I was too caught in it. Now, okay, let's take a breather, let's take a step back and okay, it's all good, it's all good.
I think there can also be a trap of someone who is on a path of consciousness to also be down on themselves for getting stuck in the story. So it's a double trap.
Yeah.
I find myself doing that too. It's like, because I default straight to anger, right? By human design, I'm an emotional manifester. Right?
Okay.
So
okay.
that's my blueprint. Yeah. So I go straight to anger, right? And I can linger in that and throw a temper tantrum, and I know that I'm caught in my anger, and I'll get really petulant, almost like a little whiny child. And then my partner has to deal with that, right? He has to deal with this angry, petulant child. And I think then, as a person who's on a path of consciousness and on a spiritual journey, we then, when we're out of that phase, we step back and go, oh God, I did it again. How come I was like throwing a temper tantrum for so long? And then we get down on ourselves for even going there. But I think it also requires a little bit of forgiveness of like, okay, I'm only human. So yeah, I threw a temper tantrum for an hour. I'm not perfect, right? And then move on.
That's nice. That's right.
Get trapped on the story of wanting no story. You know, we want to break free of that, and then the irony is we get trapped in that. And so it's constant work and introspection. And you know, I wanted to ask you about resistance when you were speaking about it, and the question of resistance and purpose. Because as you were talking about resistance, you know, resistance then leads to, what did you say? Resistance?
The sense of vulnerability.
Right.
And rejecting, I don't want this experience. I don't want what is at the moment. I would like to have a different.
Right. So resisting what is. So let's say the what is that is happening is something that we may perceive as not in alignment with our purpose. So let's just use the example of, you know, someone trying to get a promotion. They're doing everything in their power to be a great employee, a great leader, a boss, a manager, whatever it is, to get that promotion, and then they don't get it, right? But they feel in their heart of hearts that is their purpose in life. Like, I'm supposed to be in this role, right? And so one could say that if you don't fight for what it is that you want, then, you know, what is the point of living, right? However, there's a fine line there to navigate, because if we don't put enough effort or fight in it, or a sense of fighting without attaching, then we won't get anything. We won't get anywhere. But of course, if we over-attach, want, and grab, then we also will not get there. So how do we navigate the resistance and then the path of purpose?
Well, you answered that already. Without the attachment, you know, to have an intention, to have a purpose, is to really be centered in it. If I truly know that it is my purpose, then I keep my focus on this purpose, and I put out the intention, and I know that this is the right way for me. And it will show itself along the way too. It will confirm what I'm thinking and feeling and believing. It will confirm my intention. If there's a constant blockage or another trap or another not getting what I was expecting, then maybe we could reconsider our purpose and put our intention maybe somewhere else. But if we have expectations or we are attached to outcomes, I think that is not healthy. And it's a different energy towards the right intention, and putting my energy into something what I truly want and desire. I think there's a fine line, and there are always traps along the way, as you said earlier. There are traps, and I'm in it again. And then I liked also what you said about this forgiveness. All along our journey, we need to learn to forgive. But firstly, we need to forgive ourselves. And if we can forgive ourselves, we can easily forgive someone else. Forgive ourselves for our misperception or forgetting again, or trapped in this again, or I've done it again. Oh, it's all good. It's a past. Let it go. You don't need to dwell on it. Learn what you need to learn out of this, and then move on. You have your intention set. Keep on that. And if doors are open, if life is not resisting itself and saying, well, you really sure this is what you want? Are you really sure this is your purpose? If this is constantly my experience, then I might have to rethink my purpose and re-feel and sit in silence and see what comes up again. I like writing everything in a diary as well, just to reflect again and do self-inquiry, or ask my partner, or ask someone where I can exchange my experiences, my feelings. So
yeah. That comes down to remembering that purpose is not fixed.
Yeah.
That we have to constantly renegotiate and reinvestigate if it's still true, or maybe there might be some subtle tweaks along the way that we have to make to it. Because I, for sure, am not the same person I was 10 years ago. I had an idea of where I would be right now, but it's not where I thought it was then. It's something completely different.
Yeah.
I imagined it.
Yeah.
And if I was really fixed on this idea of who Johnson was going to be, I mean, I wouldn't be here today, because I would be trying to make that happen.
Exactly.
But, and I think it's this is what, you know, people say, what they mean when they say co-creation. How do you co-create with source energy, with the universe, with what is given, right? We give a little, and then we receive a little, then we listen, and then we wait, and then we respond, and then we wait, and then spirit responds.
Perfect.
And then there's this tennis match that's happening.
Yeah.
Right? And then we create something that none of us could have predicted. It's something magical.
Exactly. Perfect. That's exactly what I feel too. This match, you know. We respond, we listen. Respond and listen. You know, and my, from the Gene Keys, my line 4 in my life's work says serving. So I know in the depth of my being that I'm here to offer a service. But how to do it, that can change. I have an idea, what you said before, I have an idea that could be this, but it was different for me too 10 years ago. Now it's totally different.
And for those of you who are watching and you're not familiar with the Gene Keys, or we also made mention to the human design, these are holistic systems of integrating, you know, ancient wisdom, like from the I Ching to astrology to chakra systems. And it's really a blueprint to understand the strategy for living for yourself. And so if you're wanting to find out more on that, you know, Rolf actually reads this information. So his website is actually just his name.com. So I can share that with you later. And it's also in the blurb as well. So if you wanted to find out more about these particular ways of understanding yourself, and how I know for myself, you know, with human design, I'm not so familiar with Gene Keys, but through human design, I understood that through understanding my archetype of energy, being a manifester, knowing that I had to initiate everything, because I have what is called a repellent aura, right? Which doesn't mean like, oh God, he smells, but it's more of, it's just that my field, it's intimidating. It doesn't invite, like whenever I walked into a room, because when I didn't know this, I would walk into a room and go, why isn't anyone approaching me? Why don't people want to talk to me? You know? And then when I realized, wait a minute, that's my blueprint. My field is just not the most inviting and warm field when I walk into a cold room and I don't know anybody. I actually, the strategy for a manifestor is to initiate. So I have to go up and initiate the conversation and say hello and do all of that. And once I learned that, I could sense that when I walked into a room, I could see people like about to come up and then they get pushed away and they go to the other side. And I'm like, whoa, this is so true about me. I'm this repellent aura. And then if I just, you know, and at first I was like, oh God, I wish I was like a generator. It's like more warm and inviting. But no, that's what I was given. I was given manifestor. And so I have to accept that and make do with that. And once I learned that about myself, I was able to make like a strategic shift in how I interacted with new people in a room. right? So I mean, this is something that it goes much deeper on different levels, but I'm sure you know a lot about this. So anyway, that was a slight tangent. Since, we were talking about human design and gene keys so much. So yeah, let's talk a little bit about this last point here that we had laid out, which is about the journey of shifting the materialistic based perspective that we all have as people in this paradigm that we're in, to one that is fully present in love rather than fear. So can you maybe talk about that?
Yeah. I look at the current global crises. A lot of people suffer. I can see that. A lot of people are unsure. A lot of people don't know how life goes on. A lot of people lost relationships, lost money, lost businesses. This whole global economy came to a halt. Our whole society is on a verge of collapse, if you want. So, and I observed this with great concern, but also with great hope. For me, it means exactly that we are, as a human collective consciousness, we are shifting from a purely materialistic and profit-based worldview towards elevating our consciousness and our humanity towards more, okay, let's stop for a moment. Let's really reconsider what is really, really important in our lives. How can we come together and create or co-create a new system that is based on fairness, love, compassion, sustainability, working together, coming together, including rather than excluding, where we slowly shift on this current economic and monetary system towards something totally new. I don't know how this could look like, but I think there are enough people or groups already out there putting their ideas into the field so that something new and beautiful can emerge. And that has to include knowing who we truly are. That has to include knowing who the other is. That has to include overcoming separation and a sense of otherness. You see it with the Black Lives Matters, all life matters. From my point of view, we have made mistakes in the past, yes, of course, big time. But now it's come to a point where we have to stop and reflect and open ourselves up to a new, beautiful future, which is possible. And I think you and I, and the people who are listening to this broadcast, perhaps, we are in a position, we are here for a purpose. And I think also that is our purpose, to play an important part in this new great awakening. But it has to include our past and transcend it. And this is how we grow up as a humanity. And for me, life in general is always towards growth and towards the next level, towards more love and compassion. It cannot go backward. We've been back as far as we could, or down as far as we could, if you want. Now we have a chance to create something new and beautiful. But it needs to be based in presence and love and compassion and sustainability and inclusiveness. The old system, we don't need to fight it. What we fight, what we persist, or what we resist persists. So we need to make this old system obsolete by creating a new system. And that's the saying of Buckminster Fuller, I think he said, you don't create a new reality by fighting the old. That will take care of itself.
It's like my partner is repairing a bicycle, right? If we just let the bicycle rust, I mean the screws that they put into the bike, our
Mhm.
rusting screws.
Yeah.
It's like, oh my God, why didn't they just put anti-rust screws? Why would they do this? And so, I mean, if you were to let that bike sit there and, in the rain, and it would just fall apart and disassemble itself, right? So it would just fall apart.
Mhm.
Of course, if we take care of the screws,
Yeah.
let's say is the existing system,
Yeah.
we polish it and we buy into it and we
Yeah.
listen to all the rules and we just sit there obediently and just take it as it comes, and then we propagate the same behavior patterns. But of course, if we create something new, our energy shifts. We put our awareness and consciousness in something that hasn't been brought into reality yet.
Exactly.
And then that bike becomes just, forget about it. We create a new bike. Forget about that old one. We don't have to worry about it. Just fall apart.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Is there anything else that you'd like to share with anyone? I can talk to you all day, but I'm wary of time, of your time, and also of our viewers' time. But
Yeah, I like to talk about this topic all day long myself, because it's just my passion, and I feel I want to co-create with people this new beautiful future, and I can't wait. I'm impatient, and I know and I feel it. I feel it in my bones that the old system is just fighting. It's oh no, it doesn't want to let go. But life says, you know what? You had your time. It's all good. We've learned, and now let's get together and let's move on. See what we can do.
Let's see what we can do. Amazing. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for your passion and for your insight and your wisdom. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
I'm sure everyone listening and watching does as well. And if you want to find out more information about Rolf's work, he has a lot of e-books and articles and workbooks as well on his website around non-duality and consciousness and transformational processes and gene keys, if you want to find out more about that kind of work and conscious living. And it's just rolfkrahnert.com. That's my American pronunciation. It's ROLFKRAHNERT.com. Rolf Krahnert, or Kana. that's
Krahnert.
Yes, there you go.
That's fine.
So great. Thank you so much for tuning into Truth, Wisdom, Freedom Conversations, and we will see you next time.
Thank you for the invitation, Johnson.
Thanks.
Love talking to you and love your work.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Bye, Rolf.